we can go ahead with this.
You're good? Okay. All right, take it away, Lucy.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. November 8th today. Time's flying by. Winter's coming. We'll start off with our land acknowledgement. So on November 8th, 2023, we acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for this land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. All right, so I'll call the meeting to order at 5:32. We have regrets from Stephanie Cates this evening, as well as Mayor Sean Panko, and I'm looking around the horseshoe, and I think that's it. So we will move on to the approval of the agenda. So did everybody get a copy of it? All right, everybody, any questions about it? Anything? No? So can I have someone move that, please? Jen, thank you. And can I have someone second her? Courtney, thank you. So that motion's carried. All in favor? Okay, the motion's carried. So we will move on to the adoption of the minutes. So we have one set of minutes to adopt this evening from previous meeting on October 11th. So does everybody have a copy of those minutes or has seen them? Yep. Okay, so is there any questions or anything stood out to people about them? All right, so I'll just check my notes here and just make sure. Nope, nothing. Corey, did you have something?
I'm just gonna move that we accept the minutes.
Oh, you're moving there. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And could I have someone second them then, please? Councilor McGuire, thank you. So, all in favor? Right, motion carried. Thank you. Right along here. All right, so we have adopted the minutes. We'll move on in our agenda to disclosures of monetary interest. Does anyone have anything there? Nothing? Seeing none? Okay, we will move on. We don't have any delegations this evening, so that's not happening. Our first priority issue is the terms of reference. We'll bring forward an update on the council response, and I'll invite Director Clark to do so.
Okay, can you guys all hear me from here?
I think so.
Okay, so council voted to approve the terms of reference as presented, so we are good to go. And that is the feedback, so nice work. And that's all I gotta say.
Perfect. All right, and so that priority issue is dealt with. And procedurally, Stephanie, is there anything procedurally we have to do or?
Nope.
No.
We're good.
So committee work plan is our next priority issue, and I'll turn the floor back over to Stephanie, Director Clark, to address the work plan.
So I wanted to just identify, because I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but there is a work plan that the previous committee had put together. So I wanted to just bring it up, make sure that everybody had a copy. Thanks, Councillor McGuire, for sharing yours, and Lucy as well for sharing yours. So I'll bring it up shortly on the screen. I didn't have, I'll be honest, I ran out of paper, so I didn't print. I think I had 6 copies printed, but then I got into a fight with a photocopier, so I thought it was better if I came over here and put it on the screen. But I don't think we need to necessarily, up to you guys, have a lengthy discussion about it. But I think first and foremost is the awareness, and second, that it exists. And secondly, I think we need to start thinking about what's on it. Has obviously needs to be updated, I'm sure. Should we be focusing, doubling down on some of these priority issues that are involved in the work plan? What is it that this committee wants to really focus on for the next couple of years? Because this will drive that, strategically, it'll drive sort of the direction that we're looking at going. So obviously it's driven by you. You give me my marching orders and I'll update the documents as and when required. But just wanted to make sure that everyone was firstly aware that it exists and it has a copy of it. It's also appended to the meeting invite, and I can provide other copies as well in paper once I stop fighting with the photocopier. So just wanted to bring that up.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Director Clark. It's certainly done a wonderful, wonderful job of it, and it's a very user-friendly and very informative document. So thanks for all your hard work. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Quick question. Is this available on the website for anybody that wants to look at it?
I will be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. I do have a hunch that probably not, because it does say draft on it. So this was the previous committee's work plan that was provided to me. And so I think it would be probably a good idea to have it available on the website, but I would caveat that with making sure that this is the work plan that this committee wants to work with. So revise it over the next meeting or so, and then we confirm it and then get it out there.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? No. Director Clark, I just have a couple of things to bring forward.
Sure.
Just given the nature that it was from the last committee.
Mm-hmm.
So on the, the second page, about halfway down, says the Accessibility Advisory Committee is administered through the clerk's department. Mm-hmm. And I'm just not sure if that should now say Director of Community Services, given that it's you now.
That's a great question. Technically, committees of council are administered through the clerk, but it'd be nice to put my name on here somewhere. I want to be a part of this.
So I was just saying clerk's office and community service,
or identifying staff support.
Yeah, or just even putting Stephanie's name there.
Yeah. And then just another couple of points, if I may. Couple of pages later, where it's talking about the access to downtown storefronts. I think that was a really good point in there to work with the CIP and really to make those as accessible as possible, storefronts. So I think that, we could maybe really focus in on looking at getting some grants and maybe liaising with a CIP to do so. And so I think that was a really good inclusion. The review and monitoring, just wanted to clarify that everybody is familiar with under review and monitoring. You'll see it says requirements about the IASR. And I just wanted to clarify and make sure that everybody knows that that means the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulations under the AODA. So just I don't know if we want to spell that out there or if we're okay to leave it, given that it's explained somewhere else in the document.
Yeah, it's explained under legislative background.
Yeah, so I don't know if we're comfortable leaving that in there or if we want it spelled out again. Anybody have any feedback on that or anything? Any thoughts? If we could maybe leave that?
Lucy, we could also look at maybe doing like a glossary.
Oh,
Of
that
glossary
would be a
terms.
good idea,
That would be
yeah.
it, yeah.
That would be a good idea, yeah.
Lucy, Chris has a question.
Counselor McGuire.
Madam Chair, listening to your points here, I'm wondering, I remember when we made this, we kind of took a bunch of different ones and kind of brought them together, and the more we look at it, it's almost, we've kind of got some stuff from one and some stuff from another. So maybe would we want to kind of look at it and if we made a glossary and kind of streamline what we've got here now that we've been working with this for a little bit? Because to me, the most important part is on page 12 and 13. And some of this other stuff like municipal profile, like I don't know that somebody that's opening this up needs a map of Eastern Ontario, and it just kind of takes away from, I think, what we're trying to put forward. But so maybe, I don't know, maybe it is time for a little bit of streamlining of prioritizing what we want in this. And
I think that's a really good idea, and I think given that the document has been in circulation for a while, but now times are changing, right? And we're progressive, we're doing things differently, and we've done some projects since this development. So I think streamlining it and really looking at what's relevant to now is a really good idea, and perhaps something we could put on a future agenda and keep working with. That's a really good point. Thank you. Just another quick little technicality. Under feedback, right on that same page, under feedback, it talks about Director Art Manhire, and so I don't know how we want to change that, given that he's no longer in that position.
So I guess one of the questions I have, does this format work for folks? So knowing that this is the document that worked for the last committee, does this style of document, maybe to your point, Councillor McGuire, should we be looking at more like an actual, like a work plan as opposed to sort of like a working document where a work plan, not that I love Gantt charts, but I do love a good Gantt chart, and like a time where we map out time, where we map out projects, we prioritize. Would that be something that would be a little bit more beneficial, or someplace that, because I could play around with the format and then turn it into something else and bring it back for the next committee meeting if that was of interest. Yes.
I think this is kind of getting my brain going from last term, and I'm almost wondering now, we put a lot of effort into the terms of reference, and there's a lot of overlap now between this and the terms of reference. And I think when we were working on this, we were working on them both in parallel, so we were kind of putting a little bit of both in each.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be beneficial, to kind of, we've got a really good terms of reference. Let's get rid of the duplication in this and make this more like about getting stuff done than, the feel good. Like there's a lot of feel good content in here, but let's get some stuff done, right?
And we don't need to lose that feel-good content necessarily. We can capture it somewhere else, and maybe we can do a really good preamble or some sort of presentation. Like, we don't need to destroy it, but would it make sense? Just wondering if you want me to take it apart, try to see what we can do, and then bring it in a different format and present it maybe next time?
Yeah, sure. That would. So everybody's in agreement with that. That would be, I think, wonderful if we could streamline that a bit. And then just my final point was on the very, very last page, the very, very last point, where it's contact information and it's deputy clerk listed there, and I just don't know who best to put there. I know that's from the last document, and we can leave that, or we can change it. It's totally up to you.
Okay. All right. So I will take this apart. If anyone has any comments they want to provide me between now and next time, a month from now, I guess, please send them my way, and I will see what I can come back with.
Thank you. There was a giant spider and we had to trap it in a cup.
Oh.
So if
Okay.
you saw the faces, that's what it was. It wasn't you guys.
Yeah, I can take a hint.
Spiders are not fun.
We're over here going,
Shaking elevators, spiders. What are we doing to you?
Okay, so I think, Stephanie, if you could, sort of play with the formatting a bit, that would be, wonderful. And I'm just trying to think, is there any other, questions or?
So for the timeline portion, like a chart thing that you were suggesting, would that be like for everything that we want to work on? Like,
Could be.
yeah, okay. That's what I would like to see. Personally.
I think that would be a good idea. Kind of give it a more of a direct feel of what's going on at the present time. Especially, like I said earlier, given that it's a working document that is in circulation until I believe it's 2025. So it's just nice to keep it relevant to what's happening now and where things are going. So I think does anyone else have any questions, comments, anything else that stood out for anyone? No?
On the accessibility beach area for recommendations to council, do we know if any of that has actually happened to date? Have any of this been given to council? Do you know?
Councillor McGuire is probably a good man to answer that.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is that some of these, like if we could, maybe we want to make them more, like that one's a very tangible thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then it kind of ties into that bigger conversation we were having. So maybe we want to kind of sync these points up with things like that parks plan we were looking at last month, so that these become, because some of them are kind of more open-ended, like continue to include accessibility as a priority in future strategic plan. It's really broad, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Like let's make it like have, I don't know, one new accessible storefront downtown a year, have one addition to the park, or one, you know what I mean? Kind of put numbers behind it, because then we can say to them, okay, well, if you don't fund it this year, we're not going to make that target. And then it also goes into that budget conversation. So I guess all that to say is kind of the political answer of no. But,
that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
I think that's a good point to have it very tangible and really goal oriented and black and white. It is what it is, and then that way it's very clear what is happening, what needs to be improved on, and how we can appropriately address whatever needs to be addressed and move forward that way. So thank you for your support and points and help. All right, I think if everybody's comfortable, we can move on to our next agenda item. And that would be the accessible sidewalks. And I know we had talked about some of the accessible sidewalks and some sidewalks that are not accessible last meeting, and we wanted to continue that discussion. And I know this evening we're very happy to have Director McMahon with us, and he's going to help us out with that discussion. So, Director, if you want to open this up a little bit, and we'll...
I can give a bit of context if that helps.
Sure.
So I asked Director McMahon to join us, as we discussed, because some of the questions that came forward were from the last couple conversations around this were, how do we identify in the community sidewalks that are needing assistance or support to get accessible, to become accessible, and what have we done, what are we doing, essentially what's the plan? And so I had asked my colleague to come in and maybe share how his department manages that. I know obviously there's a lot of grandfathered in maybe areas in town, but there were also some new areas that were identified as well. And I think the Ferreira Drive where the new lift of asphalt stuff, and maybe if you can speak about that just a little bit as well, just to give some context.
Yeah, I'm going to stand.
Go for it.
Just because I'm more comfortable with that.
I was just trapped by you.
Yeah, so thank you, Director Clark, and good evening, everyone. I think it's the first time I've been to one of these meetings, so thanks for having me. Yeah, so a little context with our sidewalk program here in town. So coincidentally, right now we're doing our sidewalk condition assessment with Safe Sidewalks of Canada. That's a company, that's what they're called, Safe Sidewalks of Canada, and that's what they do. They do sidewalk condition assessments and hazard removal. So the first point of the exercise is to go through, document their visual observations in terms of deficiencies. One of the main deficiencies we're looking for in terms of minimum maintenance standards, which is legislation in Ontario, would be surface discontinuities, which would be what I like to refer to as triplips. It's a vertical displacement in the sidewalk. So the standard with minimum maintenance standards is anything that's less than 20 millimeters is within specification. If it's 20 millimeters or more, which is 3/4 of an inch, 20 mils or higher would be out of specification, meaning that it presents a tripping hazard. Okay, so from a liability perspective, obviously we want to deal with that low-hanging fruit first and foremost, as opposed to going around replacing, say, cracked panels of sidewalk, which we have a lot of it throughout town. We're not unique in that. A lot of other municipalities are faced with some of the same challenges. So anyways, long story short, we're in the midst of completing that sidewalk condition assessment, likely tomorrow. I heard from the contractor today, and they were hoping to have been done today. They got delayed a little bit. They're saying they'll be done by noon tomorrow. They provided me with the information that they've got so far. I was looking at some of the data. Specifically, I was looking at some areas down within the downtown core, the DBIA area. And there are some areas within crosswalks specifically that I would like to address this coming fall. So the first order of business is to do the assessment, finish that up, and then we have money in the budget to address some of these hazards throughout town. We have about $19,000 left, so we'll spend that and see how far that goes with some of the removal of these quote unquote triplips, I like to call them, or surface discontinuities. So that's a work in progress right now. That's literally happening kind of not right now as we speak. It's dark, but during tomorrow they'll be finishing up that assessment process. Director Clark shared with me some photos that were circulated, I believe maybe after the last meeting, with some areas of town. One of the areas being the area of Armstrong Drive and Wood Avenue.
Yeah.
I believe that was one.
That may have come through after the last meeting via email. I'm not 100% sure, but I did look at those. So the issue there, or not the issue there, but the reason it is as it is because the development that's taking place south of Armstrong Drive is still under construction. So they've only paved the first lift of asphalt, so the base course asphalt, so it hasn't received the surface course asphalt, and it won't until that project is built out a little further than it is right now. Now, that's not to say that the crosswalk depressions shouldn't be ramped. And anyway, so I reached out to Campbell's Trucking. They're the developer and the constructor of the roads up there too. I reached out to them today, and they are going to ramp them with asphalt. So that's something that, you know, is easily actionable and not something for Public Works to do. I just pass the message on to the contractor, and they go and fix it. So I'm hoping that gets buttoned up within, hopefully by the end of the week. If not by then sometime next week. So that, long story short, that'll be addressed. I don't know if was anything else, Stephanie, that I know there was some stuff that came through with respect to the park, with accessible entrance into the park.
In Murphy Park.
Murphy Park.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's we talked about that. I think that's a little bit of a larger discussion in terms of, you know, what do we want that park to look like in the future. We know that Confederation Bridge is getting replaced with a pedestrian bridge. So that RFP will be going out by the end of the week for detailed design, with the hopes that we have a bridge in place by sometime this summer. So that's going to lend itself to the park itself, perhaps maybe morphing into something different than it is there today. Meaning that, you know, we won't have vehicles driving through the park anymore because they won't have access other than from the other end. But there's an opportunity there to do something creative and cool with that park in terms of updating it. And I don't know what it looks like right now, but we have an opportunity. I think we have a bit of a blank canvas to update that, to make it a little bit more of a passive park. We're removing vehicles, but something that's a little more comfortable and open to cyclists and pedestrians and anybody and everybody that wants to use it. So the point there is, yeah, you know, the beach is not terribly accessible, but how much do we want to do right now when we know we have an opportunity to do something a little bit more robust with the park, if that makes sense. But all that to say, I mean, that's certainly not my decision. If Stephanie's directed via council, if there's something that you're going to put on your document in terms of actionable items that need to be done and presented to council for them to consider during budget, then so be it. So with that, I'll stop talking. I'd sooner maybe answer questions from the committee if there's anything specific that they want to know.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
So my first one is going to be about the bridge. Will the design come to this committee for our feedback, or how does that work?
It certainly can.
Okay.
It's going to be a relatively quick turnaround in terms of the design. I'm anticipating about 8 to 10 weeks for the detailed design.
Can we just make sure it's fully accessible?
It will be.
Okay,
It will be fully
perfect.
accessible. Yeah. So there's going to have to be some work done on the approaches, because there's going to have to be a slight grade raise to the bridge itself in order to maintain the elevation of the soffit of the bridge, so the underside of the existing Confederation Bridge. We can't be any lower or closer to the water than the existing bridge is now without doing hydraulic analysis and getting into a whole bunch of work with Parks Canada on that. So the intent there is to maintain that elevation of the underside of bridge, which will effectively raise the new structure just based on the new design codes that are in place for structure construction. So meaning the grade at the approaches will come up marginally, I think maybe about 16 inches or so. But to your point, yes, it'll be fully accessible. I mean, we'll have to be cognizant and respective of the integrated accessibility standards regulation in terms of slopes and whatnot, because it will be effectively an exterior path to travel, right? So we'll have to meet that. I believe it's a 1 in 20 slope. So yeah.
And one more question. Fiera Drive and Staples Boulevard, that new subdivision that Parkview's doing, is it paved yet?
It again would not have second lift of asphalt.
It does not have second.
Yeah.
And do we know when that would be coming?
Good question. I would think probably no sooner than when phase 2 gets built out, but it might very well not get second lift of asphalt until phase 3 is built out.
And can we request that they also do the ramp out?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's a fair ask, and I'm sure they would be more than happy to accommodate that. So
Perfect.
I
Thank
haven't
you.
been up there in a while, just because it's a bit of a rat's nest up there. Lots going on, lots of
There's lots.
lots of activity.
Yeah.
Have you been up yourself to look?
I live on Staples, so
Oh, okay.
yes.
Okay.
So the one going from Staples onto Fiera is not anywhere near accessible.
Okay.
It needs
You're
work.
noting that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can certainly pass that on to the folks at Parkview for sure.
Perfect. Thank you. And then
It'd
I know
be very-
Courtney has one
It'd
too.
be very similar to the Wood Avenue Armstrong
Yeah.
scenario. Yeah.
So
Alright,
the,
Courtney.
the street that I live on, the Chambers Street,
Okay.
it is like horrible. I've had people walking by me being like, "You should bring this up to the town," because like I literally almost faceplant every time I'm trying to get off my curb to go get my son from the bus. Like, and even the sidewalk, like you said, those triplets. My front casters, Chambers Street is so horrible that like I said, I almost faceplant all the time, just rolling down my sidewalk. Like Chambers Street is one of the worst streets that I have seen for the sidewalk.
And also the corner of McGill and Chambers, there's a huge like drain thing there in the crosswalk. So like people's
Catch basin.
wheels are getting
I
stuck in them.
can't even try to go over that. I have to go up onto the curb and like
Yeah. That one is kind of dangerous.
Yeah, and I presume there's more than one of those around town.
Especially in that area, the older area over there.
Yeah. So I don't want to
It
get
feels
tied
like-
up on, specific areas, because we could sit here all day in a week and go through and pick areas around town that we feel as though are deficient, albeit maybe perhaps not be deficient in terms of minimum maintenance standards or the accessibility standards themselves. But nonetheless, I'm appreciative of the fact that there's hazards there. It appears
I can guarantee you that it's not up to standards.
Yeah.
Like it's not I'm
But that's-
assuming it's like
Sorry to
this.
interrupt, but that's the reason for doing the sidewalk condition assessment and having those professionals come in and do an unbiased assessment of the town as a whole. And then they provide that report, and then that gives us some actionable items to go out and actually remedy some of these areas within budget, right? I don't have $1 million to spend and replace all of the sidewalks within town. So we gotta be cognizant and respective of the assessment and pick the areas of the assessment that are noted that are the worst, if that makes sense.
Are we gonna know which areas are noted as the worst and which ones are gonna be worked on? Or is that top secret?
Not necessarily. I guess you'd have to trust staff that we're focused on the worst areas. I mean, there'd be no reason to, like in terms of liability, which we're always exposed in a municipal environment to liability at any point in time, whether it's winter operations or just somebody walking down the sidewalk and having experience with a triplet. So I think it's best practice to take that assessment and deal with the worst of the worst, right? There are some areas, for instance, I drive around town. I wouldn't say every day, but a couple times a week, I'll just go and kind of drive a different street just to get a visual of kind of what's happening. And I haven't been over all streets in Smith Falls. I don't live in Smith Falls. I live in Brockville. But for instance, there was a section of sidewalk on Center Street just immediately west of Elmsley that was in quite poor repair. And I immediately got a hold of Public Works, the supervisor and foreman, and said, we need to do something there. Not replace the sidewalk, because of course that Center Street, we're going through an exercise right now, and a visioning exercise to determine what that area could be. And there's been lots documented on that, and it's been in front of council a number of times. But I didn't want to go and spend a whole bunch of money to replace the sidewalk to turn around 5 years from now and tear it all out. So what we did there was we put an asphalt overlay on that sidewalk, and It makes it safe and accessible. Still provides the same result. It's a smooth surface, albeit it's asphalt. There's nothing to preclude from using asphalt versus concrete for a sidewalk. So.
Okay. Councillor McGuire.
Thanks. Excuse me. Could we get a copy of the report when it's done, and then everybody could look, like, you know, Courtney, you could check if your Chambers Street hotspots are on there.
That's what I
but
was
then
just
we could also
asking.
see it in that context of what are the worst, and then where are we at? You know, just I think that context would be good.
Yeah, if I could,
That's what I just asked.
I mean, I'll be honest that you know, we have staff that review this stuff. I'm certainly willing to share it with this committee, albeit we need to be appreciative of the fact that it's not the committee, in my opinion, ought not to be directing, say, we need to do this spot, this spot, this spot, because that's a town function, and I've got only so much money that I can work within my operating budget, right? So, but certainly open to feedback if you see something that you guys live here, so you're aware of areas, certainly point them out, and I would presume they're going to be documented in that report regardless. But or if you've had experiences in that area, i.e. the catch basin or the crosswalk, not much we can do with that until we get to reconstruction of that street. Because of course, the catch basin's tied into the sewer, so it's a big exercise to go in. It's not just a matter of moving that structure, right?
Again, with all due respect, I mean, we are the accessibility committee, so our input is to kind of say what is accessible and what isn't. And like myself being a person in a wheelchair, living that every day, I am telling you that sidewalk is not safe or accessible.
Right.
And if the standards say it is, then the standards need to change.
Right. Yeah. Keep in mind that, you know, the sidewalk condition assessment will note areas that are, you know, if there could be ponding on the sidewalk, crack panels of sidewalk. But in terms of the minimum maintenance standards, the only thing that's considered a deficiency are those surface discontinuities, meaning that 20 mil difference in change in elevation from one sidewalk to the other.
There's lots of those.
Yeah, the triplets.
Yeah.
From a liability perspective, right? So if somebody trips and gets hurt, then we have that to go back on and say, okay, we did our inspection. As long as we're doing our inspections within one calendar year of the last, it's actually, we have to do it annually and no more than 16 months from the previous time an inspection was done. So if we go out and we inspect and we document that a particular area, say right here, you know, this is a sidewalk, wasn't deficient at that time, they measured it and it's 15 millimeters, it's within specification. If somebody trips, falls, and hurts themselves and tries to bring a claim against the municipality, that is our defense to say we did an inspection within the time frame. Here's what it measured at the time. So we have that protection. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think if I could though, it doesn't preclude us though from providing feedback, like, so, wherein we talked about this last time, we identified there were some areas that were wholly deficient, and then we were able to take that to Public Works. Public Works was able to contact the people that were involved. So I think it doesn't, like, we're not solely relying on this document because it's an organic thing, and we're going to, you know, between now and the next 16 months, we're going to find new hazards and so on. So I think having an ongoing conversation and relationship with Public Works is going to be really beneficial so that we can make sure that we're all doing the same work in the end. So I would imagine, based on your comments, and I went and took a look after you brought it up with those pictures, I mean, I'm pretty sure that the street she's talking about is going to be on the list. But I mean, if it's not prioritized, then we'd have to really consider from a budget standpoint and then work our way towards that. I think and a lot of this will be incremental, but as long as we have it on the radar, we can move the marker, hopefully.
So just so Courtney knows, you weren't here for the last meeting, but I went around after you told me where, and I took pictures of where you said, and they all seem. So, yeah.
Yeah. So what part of Chambers are?
Specifically from like, I want to say the Lockmaster's Tap House down to, well, as far as I usually go.
Like Elmsley area, like that
It'd be
number of blocks?
what's the intersection? Chambers and
Market, maybe?
Queen Street Convenience.
Yeah,
I think
Queen,
is
yeah.
further. But like from Lockmaster Staff House down to that,
Right from Beckwith all the way down to Queen
it's
Street.
that whole stretch is bad. But once you get to like out front Giant Tiger down to the end, that's where it gets really bad.
We actually, we did have an incident down a little farther east, but before you get to Queen Street, a year or so ago, so on the south side of the road, and we went in and we replaced some of the panels there. The issue with Chambers Street is the asphalt's not in great condition there either. So one might look at it and say, why aren't you reconstructing this road? Well, Councilor McGuire can attest that there's lots of streets within town, and we do have an asset management plan, right? So we have to be cognizant of condition of asphalt. We have to be cognizant of condition of underground services, you know, sewer and water that are in the ground. We try to marry that all up and to inform on which streets should we be focusing on and when, right? Like on a, say, a 10-year plan going forward. And again, that's something that evolves and changes as priorities change, and certain things like a new water tower and associated trunk main throw a little bit of a wrench into that, because these are expensive projects. And at the end of the day, we all have to be cognizant, and I certainly am, and I know Councilor McGuire is, of how much funding we have through budget to do the work. I would love to go and fix every sidewalk in town. Is it realistic? No. But we will get to the ones that are worse within the budget that I have. So if it happens to be areas on Chambers Street, then we'll address those triplets. We'll cut them, grind them down, and remove that hazard. But don't expect us to go in there and do a whole block of sidewalk, because $19,000 wouldn't even remotely touch that. So,
Right. Heidi has had her hand up.
Well, I just wanted to make, back when we were talking about having the report available as I just wanted to make note, like, that some of the, especially Chambers Street is a main street, Beckwith Street, Brockville Street. I think those, when the report that we can see, because they should be on the highest priority list, being that they're main arteries into town and around town, that they should get. I mean, God love I'm lucky enough that my street was able to be in the funding to get all new sidewalks and stuff a couple of years ago. But I think Chambers Street, Brockville Street should always be a higher priority than some of the side streets where they need, like, phase 1 and 2 happened on Beckwith Street here, and they did part of Chambers Street right at the beginning with some new asphalt and siding. But the one side, like the curbs on the corner of Chambers, got fixed and then like stopped dead. So in front of Elizabeth Exteriors and across the street by Access Taxi, where there is some big lips, didn't get touched when they were kind of down there all at the same time.
right. Yeah, and I certainly appreciate what you're saying. Like I said, if money wasn't an object, we'd just keep rolling and we'd be replacing sewers and water and sidewalks and road. But what you're talking about is where they stopped there on Chambers. That was the limit of construction. So again, we have to be cognizant of how
2
much,
feet.
right?
Like,
But
2 feet. What
But
I'm like,
you go 2 feet and then it's like, there's still bad sidewalk. Where do you stop, right? There's only so much budget in any given year to address this stuff, so.
Corey.
So when developments come to town, who is responsible for the sidewalk? Is it the developer or is it the town?
Developments such as
Like new subdivisions?
residential subdivision, developer.
Developer puts them in. Okay, thank you.
They pay for all the infrastructure. They have to put the sewer, water, services to property or to the homes, road, sidewalk, everything. Of course, we're doing Catherine Street this year, right? That's a town project. That's our infrastructure, so we're replacing it.
So is it up to that developer then after the subdivision is completely done to maintain those sidewalks? Or is that the town then?
We assume it at that time.
Okay, thank you.
You know, and I really do thank you for coming tonight, Director McMahon, and hearing what we have brought forward. And certainly appreciate all your hard work. And as just in kind of an ending comment, I do want to commend the town on their snow plowing efforts. They're, in my experience anyway, quite good. And I certainly have no trouble getting from place to place because of snow. So they have done a wonderful job, and encourage them to keep doing so.
Just on that note, if I could,
Yeah.
Chair. So I don't know if you've been watching council meetings or not, but we're actually going to be changing up our winter control operations a little bit this winter, in that staff are going to be going to 2 shifts.
I believe I was at the meeting that was talked
Okay,
about.
fair enough. Yeah, so we're going to 2 shifts. We're splitting the crew up into crews of 6, so we'll have a day and a night shift. So that's going to afford us a little bit more, well, a number of things, but the big thing is during like the wee hours of the morning, when I historically wouldn't have had staff here, I'd have to call them in on overtime. And this isn't, what I'm doing is not trying to mitigate overtime costs. I'm trying to increase our level of service within town.
Yeah.
So the nights that, you might wonder, what are staff going to do on the nights that it isn't snowing? Well, what they're going to be doing is doing snow removal on a lot of our streets with our own equipment, as opposed to bringing in contracted services. We'll still need contracted services to do the likes of Beckwith Street in the downtown, because we need to get in and out, and we need the resources to do it quickly and effectively. But again, we're going to be changing on how we plow a little bit too. We're not going to be plowing sidewalks with wings of plow trucks and or graders. Too much possibility of damage to property for that. So we're going to be plowing the streets to the curb line, leaving a windrow. So that effectively is going to marginally narrow the streets from what they were before. I like driving in previously and seeing everything push back to the curb and then up on the sidewalk and push back, but the result of that is, especially on, say, Brockville Street, for instance, coming into town. I come from Brockville, so I'm driving in 29, coming Brockville Street to go to Town Hall, and there's snow piled up 8 feet in front of people's porches. I'm like, no, we're not doing that anymore. So it will result in a whole lot more snow removal. But to your question, and I appreciate the sentiment of, staff doing a good job. They do a good job. In the downtown core, if you recall, historically we kind of plow everything up into those nodes at the intersections, big piles of snow.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've noticed is that creates some sightline issues at the intersections with those big piles of snow. So we're going to be plowing the road. We're going to plow the parking bays, but we're not going to maintain the cycle track this winter. Okay, we're going to be closing the cycle track. We're going to sign it as such. Brockville does the same thing. They have a cycle track on Highway 2, or not a cycle track, sorry, it's a shared bike lane within the road corridor.
Mm-hmm.
They close it for the winter time from November 15th to March 31st. They don't maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's still plowed, but it's not maintained to a particular standard for a cyclist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that, there'll be a windrow of snow in that cycle track. It'll be a little bit challenging for people to get through that snowbank until such time as we can get in, perhaps the following night or the night after, whenever the snow stops, to do snow removal. But I believe it to be the right thing to do. It's not unique. I mean, everywhere, every municipality, there's snowbanks along the curb line adjacent to parking stalls that people need to wade through.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I see, sorry, your first name?
Courtney.
Courtney. I see Courtney looking at me and she looks disappointed, but the areas where, say for instance, there's a accessible parking spot, and we know that we've got a number of them up and down Beckwith Street, right, with the new construction, those areas will be cleared with the access points to the sidewalks. I don't want to scare you by saying.
Okay.
They're
I was
not
just going to
gonna
say,
be-
so where there's an accessibility spot, that part of the bike lane will be done off so that
Yes.
a wheelchair can get
That's
by? Okay, thank you. Because I was just gonna say the town is going to get a lot of complaints.
No, but the areas in between, you know, there'll be a
Yeah.
windrow of snow until such time as we get in there, bring that out and clear it. I just don't like the idea of these big mounds of snow at the intersections. I've experienced some issues trying to pull out myself and almost getting T-boned. So if I'm experiencing it, I presume others are as well. So
Being able to see around them is certainly an issue too.
yeah, hard enough looking around the vehicles that are parked there, let alone a big snowbank, but it is what it is.
All right.
So if after this meeting, if you have more questions for me, certainly, you know, my email is pmcmunn@smithfalls.ca, so reach out, copy Stephanie, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have. Or if you notice anything around town, feel free to reach out. I'll always go and investigate. If it's something that's straightforward that we can act on immediately, I'll get on it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful discussion. Is there any other questions, comments, or are we okay to move to our next?
Stephanie,
I know I'm not supposed to say anything, but Courtney, just your comment about if the standards aren't working, then we should change them. Then maybe that's also one of the things that we should look at. Like if the standards are like, I can't sit here and say it's accessible or not, because to me it is and to others it's not, and so on. So I think if what is coming back and we're getting information that's saying that these are accessible and this is, these are the minimum standards that we're trying to exceed, obviously, but it's not actually working, then maybe we need to reconsider what we're advocating for, and maybe that's something that we could look at. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I mean, it's something to consider and keep that in the back of our minds.
through the chair, to that comment, who sets the standard? The town, or is that like provincial or federally? Who sets that? Provincially?
Well, provincially, there's the AODA and the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, and then there's Ontario Provincial Standards, OPS, they call
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Standards and specifications. So, but if I could augment what Director Clark said, that it's not a perfect system, and one thing that I've noticed as we try to update areas of town, and we try to we work on reconstruction of, say, Catherine Street, for instance, and I've done survey and design and contracted men for the better part of most of my career at other municipalities. What I've noticed, and maybe this is something that this committee could work on with perhaps other accessibility advisory committees from around the province, that I don't really see a great integration of the Ontario provincial standards and integrated accessibility standards. For instance, you'd mentioned about the catch basin and the crosswalk. Well, as a designer, it's always best not to place the catch basin in a crosswalk, but sometimes it's necessary just due to grading restraints on the street, because you got to get the water off the street, and that might be the low point that you got to take water to. I would argue that there's maybe other options to try to get the water to go elsewhere, and let's not put it right in a crosswalk. But there's nothing to preclude in terms of the standards from a catch basin being placed with the frame and cover in a crosswalk. So to your point, that might be something that, and that's just one example, but
So there's nothing in the standard that says that's
there's
wrong.
nothing, I mean, there's kind of unwritten best practices, that every engineer uses when they're doing design, and I would argue that let's not put catch. If I was doing a review of a site plan or subdivision plan, I'd be like, oh, let's not put that catch basin here in the crosswalk. Let's move it marginally 3 feet one way or the other, adjust your grading to make it work. But there's nothing to preclude it from happening, which is unfortunate. And we can mitigate some of the risk with the design of the catch basin frame and cover. They have that herringbone design. It's kind of on an angle, which is better for primarily cyclists and presumably somebody that uses an assistive device, a wheelchair or a walker. It's better than the openings in the grate that go longitudinally. You know what I mean?
That's what we have now, I think, right? Yeah.
It's this big circle thing that like sticks way out of the ground.
So I just wanted to point that out, that the two of them, Ontario Provincial Standards and Specifications and the IASR don't really dovetail well together. You kind of got to look at both of them when you're doing the design. But there's things that don't preclude in the design from doing things the way that they get done sometimes. Doesn't make it right, but yeah.
Well, thanks for your feedback there. That's quite wonderful. And I think we have a lot of good progress made and are very clear on how we're going to move forward. So thank you to everybody, and thank you, Director McMahon, again for hearing us out tonight. I think that wrapped. Oh, Corey.
Can we just make sure that this comes back somehow onto an agenda in the future, just to like update standards possibly, or review the standards from the provincial standard, just so that we know as a group what they are, please?
Yeah.
Sorry, through the chair, I can answer that.
Yeah, sure.
Those standards are available online if you were to Google OPS,
Okay.
Ontario Provincial Standards. It'll come up there. The general conditions are on there. It's not a great read, but if you want to read it, it's all there. There's lots of they call them OPSDs, Ontario Provincial Standards drawings, that are available as well. And a lot of them do speak to, not specifically to quote unquote accessibility, but there's a lot of accessibility provisions that you see in the integrated accessibility standards kind of woven in there. For instance, slopes and whatnot on sidewalks and at crosswalk depressions and that kind of stuff. So a lot of that stuff does marry up, but a lot of it doesn't at the same time either.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, as an engineer, you can probably attest to some of that. So
I think it'd be good for all of us to still talk about it.
Yeah.
I think, I'm thinking that would be a very welcome item to come back on the agenda perhaps next month or in the near future. We can continue, because it seems like we have a lot of very good and very robust ideas that, I think we could expand on them and reevaluate some of what we've talked about. So I think that would be a great idea. I think we can wrap up that discussions if everybody's comfortable with that. Yeah. Seeing lots of head nodding and yep. So just our last priority issue for this evening is the Treat Accessibly event. I'm just going to give a quick update on that. So everybody, I want to thank everybody who was able to participate in Treat Accessibly this year. Certainly there was a lot of wonderful media coverage and messaging around it. So thank you to all involved there. I know we did have some signs for the Treat Accessibly. Some of the lawn signs I was able to secure from John Gray, so shout out to him. And they were available up at the arena, and I believe there were some picked up. I saw some out around town, so I was very happy to see some. And especially want to thank Mayor Panko, who handed out candy with, I believe, with his wife at Town Square in the bandstand. And I think that was a great feature, not only of the Accessibility Committee's wonderful work, but also to another wonderful asset of the town that is new. And I think that was a great promotion. So thanks to Mayor Panko for that. I think that's pretty much sums up my update from Treat Accessibly. Does anyone have any feedback, questions, comments, things they noticed this year? Corey?
So our house isn't fully accessible, but we still did the accessible trick or treating. We just did it from our garage. So like anybody in town that isn't accessible can somehow make it accessible for the kids. And I think we should encourage that for next year.
Yeah. And to your point, Corey, I did see a lot of people that didn't necessarily have a lawn sign to indicate that they were a Treat Accessibly home. However, I did see a lot of families that just did Treat Accessibly without indicating that they were doing that, and they just came down to their driveways and handed out their candy from there. And so it was great to see a lot of participation that way too. So thank you to everyone who was able to participate in whatever way they could. Certainly it's a wonderful initiative, and hope we can continue in the future. So is there anything else anyone noticed or wants to bring forward? No? I am just looking to my left here.
No, I'm good.
Alright, so I think that can wrap up that brief update. So we'll move on in the agenda to correspondence items, of which there are none this evening, nor is there any in-camera issues to address. So we will move on to our next meeting date, which is our next topic of discussion. And I have written here that we are to meet Wednesday, December 13th at 5:30. Now, does that aligns with what we had decided the second Wednesday of every month? However, that Director Clark, I'm sure we could be slightly flexible if needed. So does anyone have any major conflicts with that?
I just have a quick question.
Yep.
I'm going to ask this on behalf of the mayor that's not here tonight. Do we know when county council meets? Is it always the second Wednesday of the month?
Sorry, say that again.
So the reason Sean's not here tonight is because he has county council.
Mhm.
Do we know when they meet in December yet?
Someone probably does. Not I. We can look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just if we can try and avoid having it the same night, that would be best.
That's a good point, Corey. I didn't really think of that, but certainly we can,
Mhm.
Director Clark, if we can look into that, and certainly we can perhaps be in touch via email and
Yep.
and figure out if there's a change needs to be made there in the date. So I think that wraps up our proceedings for this evening. If everybody's okay. No, Jen.
Sorry, I just wanted to let you know that I don't have my schedule yet that far. I only get like 2 weeks. But if the pattern continues the way it has been, I think I'll be working Wednesday evening. The library is open until 7, so I'll be working until 7.
Can we,
Okay.
if we move it to 7, would that be better for you then?
I mean, I could come in late, like
Yeah.
take time it takes to walk over here.
Yeah,
It's
that's
super
what I
close.
Does that work for staff though if we move it to that late? No.
But we can find somebody probably.
Okay.
It won't be me, but we could probably find someone. Yeah.
Or we can.
Do a different day, or I mean, I don't have to come to every meeting. If it just happens to fall on a work day, like that's fine too.
in Councillor McGuire, do you have?
Maybe do we want to do another poll then and just see?
Yeah.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. If we do another sort of reassessment of when people are available and
Is it only
go
Wednesdays?
from there.
Wednesdays and Thursdays, the library is open till 7. Every other day it's till 5. So
Okay.
5:30, any other day of the week works.
Okay.
Good job.
Except Wednesday, Thursday.
Except Wednesday, Thursday, yeah.
We could just double up and do it on Monday. Hmm?
No, that does not work for me.
Okay. I don't think it
Or
works for
you're not
Councillor Moore.
available on Tuesdays either, right?
So two Tuesdays of the month, but I can check that out at some
Okay.
point before I vote in the poll.
Not on Fridays, okay? Well, we'll
Alright.
make note of that.
They'll do Tuesdays, I just won't.
Tuesdays or Wednesdays or whatever day happens to happen. I will leave that in Director Clark's capable hands and we'll do another poll and see what we can come up with.
Sounds good.
Difficult as that may be. Okay, so I think we can adjourn for this evening if everybody's okay with that. Okay, so I'll have someone move to adjourn, please. Heidi, thank you. And I'll have someone second Heidi, please. Corey, thank you. So all in favor? All right, so the meeting stands so adjourned until a future date, which as of right now is December 13th, but flexibility is key. So I will see everybody when the date is established.
Perfect.
Have a good evening.
67.